Welcome to a night of total terror.
In 1968, George Romero brought us Night of the Living Dead. It became the classic horror film of its time.
We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotion.
Now, George Romero brings us the most intensely shocking motion picture experience for all time.
It gets up and kills. The people it kills get up and kill.
When there is no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
First came the night, then came the dawn. Now comes the most eagerly awaited day in horror film history.
Welcome back to Thursday of the Dead, episode 270. My name is Jace. Before I get into the Penn introducing Night of the Living Dead, just want to share something about the contest that I'm running. If you look on the previous episode, you'll see this print is what I'm giving away. And I happen to have a black light that I bought for some of my glow-in-the-dark monster figures, and I just decided to shine it on this poster and realized it actually is black light responsive, which makes this cool print, to me, even cooler. So this is my version, and here's the version that I'm giving away. And then I had to double check. Is this one black light reactive to? It is. So if you look back in the last episode, you'll see all the rules. You could share either that episode or this episode and win this. I'll pay for shipping. Anyone within the United States. Sorry for the rest of the world. Just too expensive to ship overseas right now. So good luck. I'll be announcing the winner in upcoming episode. Hopefully it's you. So now getting to Penn introducing Night of the Living Dead. Before the show at the Beverly Theater, I was happy to hear they were playing as like the intro music while we were waiting for him. They're actually playing some of the Dawn of the Dead soundtrack, which is kind of an indicator of what was to come. And I ended up staying through the entire movie just because Penn was going to stay and watch it with us. And I won't talk anymore. I'll just let Penn do the talking.
We had a thing in the back that had a list of people Penn and Teller want to see their show. And we had in there Kristen Glover, The Residents, Samuel Beckett, and then there was, of course, George Romero. And I never met him in person that early, but he was in touch with us. We did a show in 1995 called Phobophilia, which is the sexual love of fear. And we did it for like a TV station over in England. And George Romero wrote a whole sketch for us there. And then when he came here and debuted The Land of the Dead, I had a show and I wasn't able to go to it. And George Romero called me and said that he knew I couldn't make the screening. And I really wanted to, and I was really upset about it. But he said, this afternoon I've got to go in and check the theater for sound and picture. So I got to show the whole movie. Why don't you invite all your friends to come in and see it? So that was the kind of guy George Romero was. And that's why when I first met him in person, and probably you didn't get a chance to meet him, but I'll say he was my height and had a beard and had long hair and then cut it. So essentially, you're seeing fucking George Romero again. The other thing I loved about George Romero so much is that all the sickness, all the terror, and the horror was all on the screen. And that's really, really important. Arthur Penn was a good friend of mine who did, Bonnie and Clyde and very violent movies. Was also the kindest, most gentle person you can meet. And George Romero, coached Little League, baseball. He was a real family man. He was very important around Pittsburgh. He was kind and sweet, and everyone loved him. And then he would walk on a film set and say, let's fuck him up. Let's do anything we can to scare the shit out of people. And I never liked horror movies, but I realized in the late 60s and early 70s that if you had, in the horror genre, if you had enough blood and enough guts, you were able to do anything you wanted to do. It was almost a grant they were giving to horror movies and sex comedies, to do any political message you wanted as long as you fulfilled a certain body count, And George Romero made a movie that was about, George said this at one point, I couldn't find it on the internet, but I know he said it, that the movie Night of the Living Dead was his movie about what happens when a truly radical political system takes over the United States of America. Which with the election coming up, we may see it live. So he's making this, and I didn't like to see horror movies, but I knew if I wanted to see smart movies, I had to see horror. And so I saw Night of the Living Dead, and then Dawn of the Dead was it's still my favorite movie of all time. It is, I believe that in art, you should have the visceral and the intellectual collide as hard and as fast as possible. And so what you want is a smart movie that also rips your guts out. And a lot is talked about, which I'm not qualified to speak to really, but I'm going to speak to it a little tiny bit. The idea of casting an African-American actor in the role, and the lead role. And George Romero was always very careful about that, and said he got the part because he was the best actor, which is probably the best thing you can say in leading toward a meritocracy. What he didn't say in that was that the movie was not written when he cast it. It was only half written. So what happens in the ending was informed by the fact that an African-American actor in the lead. And that becomes very important. It becomes a very important intellectual movie. I mean, The Crazies becomes a movie about Americans not trusting each other. Martin becomes a movie about adolescence. Season of the Witch is probably the strongest feminist movie ever made by a man, which I guess is damning with faint praise, but there we go. It's wonderful how George Romero was able to scare the shit out of us and make us think at the same time. And I don't want to take any more time because I want to see the goddamn movie. But George Romero was one of the best that we ever had. He was America and I guess Canada. He was America and Canada at its best. He's an inspiration to everyone who works in the arts in any way. And this movie changed the world. It's very hard to think. I mean, Cervantes writes Don Quixote and invents the novel. And George Romero does Night of the Living Dead and invents the zombie, which becomes a symbol and a political commedia dell'arte. It becomes something used in, someone must know this number, but it must be hundreds of movies that use that symbol the same way he used it, as consumerism, as being attacked by ourselves, as cannibalism, as comments on capitalism, comments on trust, has been used over and over again. But it all starts with this movie, Night of the Living Dead. I know that there's We Are Legion before that, but the symbol of what a zombie means in American cinema is all started with this movie. And all the stuff you see in this movie, it's like the people that get fucked over the most, right? The Velvet Underground, you hear them now and you go, oh, they sound like everybody else. Yes, because everybody else ripped them the fuck off. Beethoven just sounds like everybody else. Yeah, because he invented it. And George Romero, this movie looks like every other zombie movie because every other zombie movie starts here. And that's kind of the serious stuff. I gotta tell you, my heart is in this movie, and I love George so much. I want to tell one funny story, if I may. I assume you've all seen Dawn of the Dead, is that right? Yes. Because you have to have seen this to understand the story. And I'm only telling you it because I told George Romero it, and I was so proud of it because he laughed his ass off. I was on the road, and Dawn of the Dead was playing a midnight show in God fuck USA. I don't know where we were. We were on the road. On the road is just a place, right? And so one of the crew guys, my good friend Mark Garland, a friend since high school who ran our crew, he and I went out to see a midnight show of Dawn of the Dead. And there were 6 people in the theater. There were the 2 of us, and there were 4 high school students on a date. There were 2 boys and 2 girls, and they were sitting behind us. And I went out to get popcorn and realized that the 4 of them who were sitting in 2 different rows behind each other had already begun very serious heavy petting, and that this was going to be a sexual event for them. Now, we were sitting kind of in front of them, and we very, very much wanted to watch high school students having sex while Dawn of the Dead was going on, but we also realized that we would probably get beat up. So we were grabbing looks here and there, you know? And during the trailers of the movie, the girl in the second row, the 2 rows, the teenagers, well, she just disappeared out of sight. And she was in the guy's lap. And Mark and I kept looking around and going, yeah, she's still going down on him. Right? Okay. Surprising, he's like 17 years old, but God bless him, you know. And that was going on and on and on. And this is astonishing, and I believe it questions my virility. But the movie was so good, we kind of forgot about the high school students in the rows behind us. And think about Dawn of the Dead. Think about it hard. It was 1 hour and 15 minutes into the movie when we heard her voice as she sat up and said, "Oh, they're in a shopping mall." I told George that story, and he said, "That is my favorite story about Dawn of the Dead ever. I've done my job. That's what it's for." So I would now like to say, I think one of the finest movies ever made, and a movie that comments on our culture, and a movie that made a lot of our culture what it is. And I'm going to see it in the theater, sit with my friends. So I love you all. Peace. And never be dead!
Thanks for watching. See you next week.